The cracks beneath the surface. Kayla stood in front of the full-length mirror, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the lace sleeves of her ivory silk wedding gown. The dress hugged her figure perfectly, its intricate embroidery shimmering under the soft glow of the chandelier in the bridal suite. She looked stunning, every bit the vision of a bride. But as she gazed into her own eyes, she could see the tension lurking beneath the surface. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. At least, that's what everyone kept telling her. She exhaled deeply, pressing her palms against her stomach to steady the flutter of nerves that refused to settle. It wasn't just the usual wedding jitters. It wasn't the weight of making a lifelong commitment. No, this unease had been building for weeks, whispering doubts she tried to ignore. A sharp knock at the door snapped her out of her thoughts. The door swung open, and her best friend, Jada, breezed in, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. Jada's sleek, emerald green bridesmaid dress hugged her curves, her dark curls bouncing as she moved. She radiated confidence, her wide grin lighting up the room. "Girl, you are glowing," Jada exclaimed, handing Kayla one of the glasses. Kayla managed a small smile. "Am I?" She took a sip, letting the crisp bubbles momentarily distract her from the knot in her chest. Jada studied her for a moment, then set her own glass down. "Okay, what's up?" She folded her arms. "I can feel your energy, and it's not the 'I'm about to marry the love of my life' kind." Kayla sighed, looking down at her champagne flute. She wanted to brush it off, to tell Jada everything was fine. But Jada had been her best friend since college, the one person who could always see through her walls. "It's just Ryan," Kayla admitted quietly. "He's been acting different, distant, irritable. I don't know. It's like—" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Like he's changed," Jada finished for her. Kayla hesitated, then nodded. Jada's expression darkened. "Kay, if you have doubts, real doubts, you don't have to do this. You know that, right?" "I love him, Jada," Kayla said quickly, as if saying it aloud would make it all feel right. Jada sighed, stepping closer and gripping Kayla's hands. "Loving someone isn't enough if they don't see you, if they don't respect you." Kayla swallowed. She knew exactly what Jada meant. Ryan had always reassured her that his family's judgment didn't matter, that their whispered remarks and dismissive attitudes would fade once they saw how happy he was with her. But Kayla wasn't sure anymore. His mother had been the worst. From the very beginning, Patricia had made it clear that she saw Kayla as an outsider. She was polite in a way that wasn't warm, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. At dinners, she would ask Kayla about her work, her background, but always in a way that felt more like an interview than a conversation. And then there were the subtle things. The way Patricia had conveniently forgotten to include Kayla's parents' names on the wedding invitations. The way she had completely taken over the seating chart, erasing Kayla's choices without a second thought. The way she always introduced her to others as Ryan's fiancée, but never as Kayla. Kayla's parents had noticed, of course. Her mother had pulled her aside more than once, her voice full of quiet concern. "Love isn't always enough, sweetheart," she had warned. "Not if the people around him refuse to see you as his equal." Her father had been more direct. "Watch how he handles pressure, Kayla. How he defends you when it counts." At the time, she had dismissed it all as overprotectiveness. But now, standing here in her wedding gown, she wasn't so sure. She took a deep breath and shook her head, forcing a smile. "Ryan loves me. Once we're married, things will settle." Jada didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. Instead, she gave Kayla's hands a reassuring squeeze. "All right, but if anything happens today, anything, you tell me, okay?" Kayla nodded, even as a sliver of doubt slid through her. A knock at the door interrupted them again. This time, it was the wedding planner. "5 minutes until showtime," she announced cheerfully. Kayla's pulse quickened. "This is it." Jada grinned and handed her the bouquet. "Ready?" Kayla forced herself to nod. ready. But deep down, she wasn't sure if that was true. The ceremony. The church was breathtaking. White roses and eucalyptus garlands lined the pews, golden light filtering through the stained glass windows. A string quartet played softly, setting the mood as guests whispered among themselves. Ryan stood at the altar in a sharp black tuxedo, his blonde hair neatly styled. He was handsome, no doubt about that. But Kayla searched his face for something deeper, some sign of warmth, of reassurance. Instead, his jaw was tight, his smile strained. As she walked down the aisle, her father by her side, she felt the weight of 100 eyes on her. She recognized some faces, her family, her friends, but most were Ryan's people. People who barely looked at her, who whispered behind their hands. Patricia sat in the front row, her expression unreadable. Kayla lifted her chin. She refused to let them intimidate her. Ryan's eyes met hers as she reached the altar. He took her hands, but his grip was colder than she expected. The officiant began the ceremony, reading from the script they had chosen together. But Kayla barely heard the words. She was too focused on Ryan, on the way his hands twitched slightly, on the tension in his shoulders. Something was wrong. Then came the vows. Ryan was supposed to go first. He cleared his throat, shifting on his feet. He glanced at his mother, then at Kayla. And then, to her shock, he hesitated. The silence stretched. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Kayla's stomach twisted. "Ryan," she whispered. He blinked, forcing a smile. "Sorry. He shook his head. "I need a second." A second. Kayla's heart pounded as he turned away for a brief moment, his breathing shallow. When he faced her again, his expression was unreadable. "I love you, Kayla," he said, his voice tight. "I do." Something about the way he said it made her stomach drop. Then, without warning, Ryan's grip on the champagne flute from earlier tightened, and before anyone could react, he threw the glass straight at her face. The impact was instant. A sharp crack of glass, the sting of liquid splashing against her skin. Gasps filled the church. Kayla staggered back, her vision blurring. The room spun. And then, chaos, the shattered illusion. A stunned silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Kayla barely registered the gasps, the whispers, the scraping of chairs as guests shifted in disbelief. The sharp sting on her cheek was nothing compared to the shock surging through her body. She blinked, trying to process what had just happened. Her wedding dress, once pristine, was now stained with the golden hue of champagne, the lace glistening with broken droplets. A jagged piece of glass lay at her feet, reflecting the dim glow of the church's chandeliers. For a moment, all she could do was stare at Ryan, her fiancé, the man she had spent years loving, defending, choosing, again and again. And he had just thrown a glass at her. Not spilled, not dropped, thrown. Her breath hitched. Ryan's face was unreadable, his blue eyes cold and calculating. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look shocked. He looked angry, as if she had done something to deserve it. A tremor ran through Kayla's body, her fingers curling into fists. Then, all at once, the church erupted into chaos. "What the hell just happened?" Jada's voice cut through the stunned murmurs, slicing through the tension like a blade. Chairs scraped against the floor as guests turned to one another, their faces twisted with confusion and outrage. Some were whispering, others frozen in disbelief. Kayla's father was the first to react. With a growl of fury, he surged forward, his broad shoulders tense, his fists clenched at his sides. His eyes, always calm and wise, now burned with unfiltered rage. "You just threw a damn glass at my daughter," he roared, his voice shaking the very walls of the church. Ryan barely flinched. He straightened his tuxedo, running a hand through his neatly combed hair as if he had just committed a minor offense. She was looking at me like that," he muttered, his voice thick with irritation. "Like what?" Kayla couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her mother rushed to her side, wrapping a protective arm around her. "Baby, are you okay?" she asked, her voice tight with concern as she dabbed at Kayla's cheek with a tissue. The champagne had stung, but Kayla wasn't sure if it was from the liquid or the impact of the glass. She forced herself to take a deep breath, the room tilting slightly. She wasn't going to cry. She refused to let them see her cry. "I'm fine," she whispered, though she didn't feel fine at all. But her father wasn't fine. He took a step closer to Ryan, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked like it might shatter. "Explain yourself, boy." Ryan let out a sharp exhale, as if he were the one who had been wronged. He turned to his mother, Patricia, as if expecting her to save him. And of course she did. "Everyone, please." Patricia stood from her seat, her carefully curated pearls catching the candlelight. She was calm, composed. Too composed. "Let's not turn this into something it's not." Kayla's stomach churned. Something it's not. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. Her fiancé had just assaulted her in front of their wedding guests, and Patricia was already working to sweep it under the rug. Jada's furious voice broke through. "You're kidding me, right? Your son just threw a damn glass at the bride. And you're acting like it's nothing." Patricia pursed her lips. Ryan was under a lot of pressure. Weddings are stressful. Sometimes emotions run high. Kayla's hands began to shake. Stress. Stress was misplacing the wedding band. Stress was forgetting your vows. Throwing a glass in your bride's face was something else entirely. Patricia turned to Kayla, her expression carefully measured. "Kayla, dear, I'm sure you understand. This is not the time to make a scene. There are many important people here." Jada let out a sharp laugh, completely unamused. "Oh, I get it now. This isn't about Kayla. This is about your image." Kayla's father took another step forward, his face dark with rage. "I don't give a damn who's in this room," he growled. "No one puts their hands on my daughter." Ryan let out a long, slow breath, rubbing his temple as if he were the victim here. "Can we all just calm down?" The arrogance in his tone made Kayla snap. Her hands balled into fists as she stepped forward, her voice sharp and unwavering. "Calm down," she echoed. "You threw a glass at me, Ryan, on our wedding day, in front of everyone." Ryan exhaled, shaking his head. "It wasn't like that, Kayla. You're blowing this out of proportion." Kayla's stomach twisted. She had heard those words before. "You're overreacting. You're reading too much into it. You're being too sensitive." Every time Ryan dismissed her concerns about his family, every time he ignored the way his mother belittled her, every time he pretended not to notice the way his friends made her feel like she didn't belong. And now, even after this, he was still trying to gaslight her. No more. Something inside Kayla snapped. She took another step forward, her voice clear and unwavering. "You threw something at me, Ryan, and now you want me to pretend it didn't happen." He sighed. "It was an accident." "No, it wasn't." Her voice was deadly calm. Ryan's jaw tightened. She felt Jada beside her, her unwavering support giving her strength. "You know what, Ryan?" Kayla said, her voice steady. "This is the real you, isn't it?" Ryan's face hardened. "This is who you really are. The guy who lets his family humiliate me. The guy who dismisses my feelings. And now, the guy who hurts me." She took off her engagement ring, the beautiful, expensive ring that Ryan's family had picked out, and she threw it to the ground. A sharp gasp rippled through the crowd. Then she turned to Jada, who grinned like she had been waiting for this moment. "Let's go." Kayla's father gave her a proud nod, placing a strong hand on her shoulder. "We're right behind you, baby girl." Ryan's face twisted with anger, his mouth opening as if to argue. But Kayla had already turned away. The girl who had walked down the aisle with doubts and insecurities was gone. In her place stood a woman who refused to settle for anything less than she deserved. As she strode down the aisle, her best friend at her side, her family following close behind. She felt light. She was walking away from a life of uncertainty, from a man who had never truly valued her, and toward something better. As she reached the church doors, she heard Patricia's frantic whispers, Ryan's quiet cursing, the stunned murmurs of the guests. But Kayla didn't look back. She was done, walking away and rising stronger. The grand doors of the church creaked open, the cold breeze rushing in as Kayla stepped out. The moment her heels touched the stone steps outside, a strange sense of relief washed over her. The winter sky stretched vast and gray above her, heavy with the weight of an oncoming storm. But Kayla felt lighter than she had in months. Years, maybe. Behind her, chaos still brewed. The wedding guests were buzzing with murmurs and gasps, their carefully curated social masks slipping in the face of such an unexpected disaster. Some guests had already started leaving, either out of discomfort or because they had never truly supported the wedding in the first place. Others remained, eager to see how the scandal would unfold. Kayla could hear Patricia's frantic voice trying to smooth things over. "Everyone, please, let's not make rash judgments. This is all a misunderstanding." Jada let out a dry laugh beside Kayla. "Girl, she's really trying to PR her way out of this." Kayla didn't reply. She was still processing everything. The glass, the sting, the realization. She had always known Ryan's family looked down on her. She had always known they saw her as an intruder in their world of old money, pristine country clubs, and carefully controlled legacies. But Ryan himself, she had wanted to believe he was different, that he loved her enough to stand by her side, that he would fight for her. Instead, he had become them. No, she corrected herself. He had always been one of them. He had just been good at pretending. The cold wind sent a chill down her spine, but she wasn't sure if it was from the temperature or from the realization that she had almost married a man who was capable of this. Not just the glass, but the gaslighting, the silence, the way he had stood there, watching, as his mother minimized her pain. Jada slipped off her shawl and draped it over Kayla's shoulders. "We need to get out of here." "You okay?" Kayla nodded, though she wasn't sure if it was true. "Where do you want to go?" Jada asked. "We could hit up a bar, drown this disaster in margaritas." Kayla let out a soft chuckle despite herself. "That's tempting. I'm always tempting." Jada winked, trying to lighten the mood. Kayla exhaled, shaking her head. I just want to go home." Jada nodded. "Say no more." Before they could move, Kayla's father walked out, his fists still clenched at his sides. His anger hadn't faded. If anything, it had only deepened. His eyes scanned her face, searching for any sign of distress. "You sure you're okay?" "I am now," she said softly. Her father exhaled, then placed a warm, strong hand on her shoulder. "I knew this wasn't right from the start," he admitted, "but I wanted to trust you to make your own choices. And you did." Kayla looked up at him. "You're not disappointed in me." His expression softened. "Disappointed? Kayla, I am proud of you. You stood up for yourself today. You chose you." She swallowed the lump in her throat, her eyes stinging. Before she could respond, more footsteps echoed behind them. "Ryan." She stiffened instinctively. Jada muttered under her breath, "Oh, hell no." Ryan jogged up to them, his expression unreadable. His tuxedo was still perfect, his golden hair still neatly styled, like he hadn't just thrown a glass at his bride. But Kayla could see it now. The tightly controlled mask. The man who thought he could smooth things over with the right words, the right tone. He had done it before. Not this time. Ryan stopped a few feet away, glancing at her father, then at Jada. His jaw twitched when he saw them standing so protectively close to her. "Can I talk to Kayla?" he asked, his voice forced calm. Her father scoffed. "Not a chance in hell." Ryan exhaled, then looked at her. "Kayla, please, just a minute." She stared at him for a long moment. Then finally she nodded. Her father's eyes darkened, But he didn't argue. Instead, he folded his arms, standing close by in case Ryan tried anything. Kayla turned to Jada and gave her a small nod. Jada hesitated but stepped aside. "I'll be right here," she warned. Ryan let out a breath when it was just the two of them. "Kayla, no." Her voice was cold, steady. His mouth snapped shut. "I don't want to hear excuses, Ryan," she said. "Not this time." He swallowed. I lost control. I didn't mean to." "Didn't mean to," she repeated. "Ryan, you threw a glass at me. I was angry. And that justifies it." "No." "Then why did you do it?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. He didn't have an answer. Kayla felt the last shred of emotion she had for him wither away. This wasn't love. It had never been. Ryan loved control. And when he felt like he was losing that control, he lashed out. She took a slow breath. "I used to think you were different." He flinched. "But you aren't. You never were." Ryan clenched his jaw. "Kayla, I love you." She shook her head. "No. You love what I represented. You love the idea of being the good guy, the one who dated outside his circle, who got praise for being with me." She let out a dry laugh. "You wanted me as long as I made you look good." Ryan paled. Kayla stepped back. This is over." His face tightened. "Kayla." "No, Ryan." She held up a hand. "You will not contact me again. You will not try to explain. You will not try to make this about you." He opened his mouth, then shut it. Kayla turned on her heel and walked back to Jada and her father. Her father nodded approvingly. Jada grinned. "That's my girl." Kayla took one last look at the church, the place where she had almost made the biggest mistake of her life. Then, without another glance at Ryan, she walked away. For good. A phoenix rises. The crisp air stung Kayla's skin as she stepped away from the church, each stride carrying her farther from the life she almost shackled herself to. The weight on her chest, the one she hadn't realized she had been carrying, was beginning to lift. But the echoes of the evening still roared in her mind. Ryan's face, the tension in his jaw, the way his hand hadn't trembled when he threw that glass. She wanted to shake off the memory, but it clung to her like the wet fabric of her champagne-stained dress. Jada's voice cut through her thoughts. "So, do we burn the dress now or later?" Kayla let out a small breathy chuckle despite herself. It was expensive. "And so was your dignity. We're picking the dignity." Jada wrapped an arm around Kayla's shoulders and led her toward the parking lot, where her car sat waiting. Kayla's father walked on her other side, still tense, still fuming. "Are you sure you don't want me to handle this?" he muttered under his breath. "I could make a few calls, make sure Ryan gets the kind of attention he deserves." Jada smirked. "You mean a few well-placed conversations with certain influential people?" Her father didn't confirm or deny. Kayla sighed. "I just want to go home." Her father gave her a long, assessing look, then nodded. "All right. But if he or his family tries anything, I want to know about it." Kayla swallowed hard. She hadn't even thought about what Ryan's mother would do after this. Patricia was the queen of damage control. She had spent years curating her family's perfect image, making sure no scandal left a lasting stain. And Kayla had just humiliated them all. Good. Jada helped Kayla into the car before sliding into the driver's seat. "You know we're not actually going to your place, right?" Kayla frowned. "Jada." "Nope. Not up for discussion. Your apartment is filled with wedding crap. Dresses, decorations, gifts. You need a break from all that. I'm taking you somewhere that doesn't smell like disappointment." Kayla sighed but didn't argue. As Jada pulled out of the parking lot, Kayla finally let herself exhale. Her phone was vibrating nonstop in her clutch. Texts, missed calls. From Ryan, his family, friends. The gossip was probably already spreading like wildfire. She ignored it. For the first time in a long time, she didn't care. A new beginning. Jada didn't stop driving until they reached a cozy apartment in the city, a place filled with warm, welcoming energy. Her apartment. The scent of cinnamon candles and lavender filled the air as Jada opened the door. "All right. You're staying here tonight. I don't care if I have to physically tie you to the couch." Kayla gave her a tired smile. "I appreciate it." "You should. Now, first things first." Jada pulled a bottle of wine from a cabinet. "We drink." Kayla raised an eyebrow. "You don't think I need, like, water and emotional processing first?" Jada poured a glass and handed it to her. "Girl, we'll process later. Tonight, we celebrate." Kayla stared at the wine. "Celebrate?" Jada clinked her glass against Kayla's. "You dodged a life sentence today. That's worth a damn toast." Kayla let out a small laugh and took a sip. The warmth of the wine spread through her, dulling the sharp edges of her emotions. For a while, they just sat there, sipping their drinks, wrapped in the comfortable silence of long-time friendship. Then, finally, Kayla spoke. "I almost married him." Jada didn't respond immediately. She let Kayla sit with the words. Finally, Kayla looked up. "What if I hadn't left?" Jada gave her a pointed look. "You did leave. That's what matters." "But what if I didn't?" Kayla pressed. "Would he have done it again?" Jada sighed, swirling her wine. "Maybe. Maybe not. But ask yourself this. Do you really want a marriage where that's even a question?" Kayla's stomach twisted. No, she didn't. Jada leaned back, crossing her legs. "Look, I know you loved him. I know you thought you could fix it, but some people don't need fixing. They need exposing." Kayla exhaled. "God, I was so blind." Jada softened. "You weren't blind, Kay. You were hopeful. There's a difference." That made something in her chest ache. Hope. That's what had kept her with Ryan for so long. The hope that he would change. That love would be enough. That she could fight for their relationship. But love was never meant to be a fight. Love was meant to be safe. Kayla reached for her phone, her fingers hovering over the screen. "Thinking about calling him?" Jada asked knowingly. Kayla shook her head. Then, without another thought, she blocked Ryan's number. Jada grinned. "Now that's the kind of emotional growth I like to see." Kayla laughed softly. No more second chances. Jada raised her glass. "To new beginnings." Kayla clinked her glass against hers. "To choosing myself." And for the first time in years, Kayla felt free, unraveling the past, reclaiming the future. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains of Jada's apartment, casting warm golden streaks across the wooden floors. The air smelled like fresh coffee, cinnamon, and the remnants of the wine they had indulged in the night before. Kayla blinked awake, the weight of exhaustion still clinging to her, but it wasn't just physical. It was the exhaustion of realization, of coming to terms with everything she had ignored for so long. The wedding was supposed to be today. Well, not anymore. Jada waltzed into the living room, wearing an oversized t-shirt that read, "Men lie, mimosas don't." She held 2 steaming mugs of coffee, one of which she handed to Kayla. "Morning, queen of second chances, no more," Jada said, plopping down on the couch beside her. Kayla sighed, wrapping her hands around the warmth of the mug. "I should feel worse, shouldn't I?" Jada raised an eyebrow. "Do you?" Kayla thought about it. No. She didn't feel regret. She didn't feel sadness over Ryan. She felt lighter, freer. "What I feel is stupid for not seeing it earlier," she admitted. Jada took a sip of her coffee. "You weren't stupid. You were conditioned to think love meant sacrificing yourself. That's what toxic relationships do." Kayla stared at the dark liquid in her mug. "You saw it before I did." "I always saw it," Jada said bluntly. "Your family did too. Hell, even Ryan probably saw it, but he counted on you not wanting to see it." Kayla exhaled slowly. "How did I let it get this far?" Jada set her mug down. You wanted to prove people wrong. You wanted to believe that love could conquer all, that you could be the exception. And when things started getting bad, you convinced yourself it wasn't that bad. Because admitting otherwise meant admitting you had wasted time on someone who never deserved you. Kayla's throat tightened. It was true. Every single time Ryan's mother dismissed her, every time Ryan ignored her concerns, every time she felt like an outsider in her own relationship, she had swallowed it down. Because she wanted it to work. She had ignored the signs because admitting they were real meant accepting that she had built something on a crumbling foundation. And now, she had finally let the house collapse. Kayla took a deep breath. So what now? Jada grinned. Now, we make a list. Kayla blinked. A list. Jada jumped up, grabbed a notepad from the kitchen counter, and plopped back down beside Kayla, flipping to a blank page. Damn right. A reclaiming Kayla list. Things you actually want to do, now that you're not busy shrinking yourself to fit into Ryan's world. Kayla hesitated, then took the pen. The moment it touched the paper, ideas filled out. Travel solo. No compromise, no waiting for someone else. Start that business I always talked about. My dreams, my timeline. Reconnect with myself. Who am I when I'm not someone's girlfriend? Therapy. Because, wow, I probably need that. Celebrate. Because leaving was a victory, not a failure. Jada peeked over her shoulder. Dan, I was expecting drink more wine and get a dog, but this is some serious post-breakup glow-up energy. Kayla smiled, feeling the weight of possibility settle in her chest. She had spent years pouring herself into a relationship that never poured back. Now, she was about to pour into herself. The storm hits. As the hours passed, the reality of her decision began rippling through the world outside. Her phone, which she had ignored all morning, was blowing up. Curious, she finally unlocked it. Messages, missed calls, social media exploding. And then, at the very top of the list, a text from Ryan. She hesitated, then clicked it open. Ryan, I don't understand why you're making this worse. We could have fixed it. You humiliated me in front of everyone. Kayla scoffed. Humiliated him. She had saved him from the disgrace of being a man who abused his wife. And yet, even now, he was twisting it, making himself the victim. Another text popped up. Ryan, I was stressed. We were both overwhelmed. That's all. Kayla clenched her jaw. Then, a third text. Ryan, at least give me a chance to talk in private. You owe me that. Owe him. Kayla had spent years giving him chances. She put the phone down without replying. But that wasn't all. Her social media had exploded. Some posts were from guests at the wedding, gossiping about what had happened. Others were speculating. And a few people, Ryan's close circle, were spinning the narrative. Honestly, she should have handled it privately. Publicly humiliating him was a bit much. If my wedding got ruined over something small, I'd be pissed too. It was just a moment of stress. People fight. She overreacted. Kayla's stomach twisted. Even now, people were defending him. Even now, they were minimizing what he had done. Jada peered over her shoulder, reading the comments. And this is why I have a block first. Ask questions never policy. Kayla exhaled, steadying herself. I knew they'd do this. Ryan's family controls narratives. That's what they do. Yeah, but here's the thing. Jada looked at her seriously. They don't control yours. Kayla met her gaze. She had spent years being the quiet one, the understanding one, the one who let things slide. Not anymore. She picked up her phone, opened her social media, and typed. No woman should have to explain why she left after being disrespected, hurt, or degraded. Love is not a war zone. I walked away, and I will never apologize for choosing myself. She hit post. Jada grinned. That's my girl. Kayla smiled. She had left Ryan. But more importantly, she had reclaimed herself. The woman who walked away and never looked back. The moment Kayla hit post, she knew there was no going back. Not that she wanted to. She had spent too long biting her tongue, suppressing her instincts, and making herself small so that Ryan and his world could feel bigger. But those days were over. The reaction was immediate. Her phone buzzed incessantly as likes, shares, and comments poured in. Some were supportive, with women sending messages of solidarity, strangers thanking her for speaking up, and friends cheering her on. Others, the backlash was just as fierce. "Oh, here we go. Another woman playing the victim. You're just bitter because he comes from money, and you don't. If you truly loved him, you would have worked through this privately. He barely touched you, and you ruined his life." Drama queen. Kayla expected it, but expecting it didn't make it sting any less. Jada, who had been lounging next to her on the couch with a bowl of popcorn, rolled her eyes. Damn, people really hate it when a woman refuses to be a doormat. Kayla put her phone down. They want me to be silent. Jada smirked. So what are you gonna do about it? Kayla leaned back, crossing her arms. Keep living. Jada grinned. Exactly. The unraveling of Ryan's perfect world. By the following week, things had shifted. Kayla had gone back to her apartment, though not without Jada's insistence that she stay over whenever she wanted, and started picking up the pieces of her life. Except this time, she wasn't just moving on. She was rebuilding. She quit the wedding planning group chats, sent thank you notes to people who had supported her, donated the wedding dress because there was no way in hell she was keeping that cursed fabric. And then, just as she was starting to settle into her newfound peace, the real storm hit. It started with an anonymous post from a different woman, then another, and another, each one telling a familiar story. Stories of Ryan's condescending words, his temper, his emotional manipulation. Stories of how he charmed them, made them feel special, only to slowly chip away at their confidence until they didn't recognize themselves anymore. Stories that sounded exactly like hers. Kayla stared at the screen, her stomach twisting. Ryan wasn't just bad to her. He had a pattern. Her phone rang. Jada. Did you see this? Jada practically shouted through the receiver. Your ex-fiancé is trending for all the wrong reasons. Kayla swallowed. I saw. I mean, we knew he was trash. But this is nuclear garbage fire level. And she was right. The internet had taken the allegations and run with them. Ryan's reputation, so carefully constructed by his family, was cracking. Some people still defended him. Others, they were starting to see. Ryan reaches out. 3 days later, Kayla was finishing her second cup of coffee when a text from an unknown number popped up. Ryan, can we talk? She stared at it for a long moment, fingers hovering over the screen. Then, without hesitation, she blocked the number. The next morning, another text. Different number. Ryan, this is getting out of hand. I know you're mad, but you're making things worse. Block. A call. Blocked. An email. Deleted. Kayla exhaled slowly. Ryan wasn't reaching out because he cared. He was reaching out because he was losing. And that wasn't her problem. Closure on her own terms. It was a crisp Saturday morning when Kayla found herself at her parents' house. Her father was outside, tending to his small vegetable garden, while her mother was inside, humming to an old soul record as she prepared tea. Kayla sat at the kitchen table, staring at her hands. Her mother set a cup in front of her, taking the seat across from her. You've been quiet. Kayla sighed. I guess I'm just processing. Her mother tilted her head. Processing what? Kayla hesitated. The fact that I almost married a man who wasn't just bad for me, but bad in general. Her mother stirred her tea thoughtfully. You know what I think. Kayla looked up. I think you didn't almost marry him. I think you chose not to. Kayla blinked. Her mother continued. You saw the truth and you walked away. That wasn't luck. That wasn't chance. That was you choosing yourself. Kayla swallowed the lump in her throat. For so long, she had felt like she had barely escaped, like she had been seconds away from being trapped in a life of misery. But maybe she hadn't barely escaped. Maybe she had saved herself. She exhaled slowly. Her mother reached across the table, squeezing her hand. You did the right thing. And no matter what they say, what he says, you owe no one an explanation. Kayla nodded. She wasn't a victim. She was a survivor. The future is hers. A month passed. Then, too, the world moved on. Ryan's family worked hard to clean up his image, but the stain remained. His perfect reputation, gone. Kayla, she was thriving. She launched her own business, an event planning company that prioritized real love over aesthetics. She traveled, solo and with friends. She went to therapy, learning how to trust herself again. One afternoon, while sitting at a cafe, she got a message from an unknown number. She debated deleting it, but curiosity won. Unknown. I just wanted to say, you inspired me. I walked away too. Thank you. A small smile tugged at her lips. This wasn't just about Ryan anymore. This was about every woman who had ever been made to feel small, every woman who had been told to stay quiet, every woman who had convinced herself that maybe it wasn't that bad. Kayla had walked away, and she would never stop walking forward. For herself, for her future, for the women who would see her story and realize they could walk away too, and they didn't have to look back.